even worse is you've been riding a bike for 10 years, but all you're doing is riding this bike thinking, oh man, is this when it's gonna fall? Okay, this is gonna be when it falls. I'm gonna go over this curve. Oh, is it gonna fall? Hi, this is Dom with Bad Water. This is the second episode with Mindset Cultivation about expectation and detachment. It's the same subject that we had last week, but I just want to go a little more into depth about expectations and the kind of the dynamics of it, and then using detachments to work with expectations and be able to overcome a lot of the negative expectations we have of ourselves and of events that never even happened yet. Let me get into kind of a background with my relationship with expectations. I think that some of the least proud moments I've had in my life came out from clinging to an expectation. So whether it was I applied to a job and I just put all my emotions and worth into that application for the job, and then I didn't get it. So that's the first problem, was that I applied to that job and I wouldn't apply to any others. And I would think so much about this job and the interview that might be coming up that then I get over psyched out with the interview, and then probably even mess that up. Don't I feel as if my interviews went okay, but then you just, yeah, it's in the back of your head. Your heart is racing when you're doing these interviews, and the reality is that right now, uh, what's they're trying to hire someone and you are trying to get hired into something, and you're just trying to get paid. And the actual passion that comes from your self-worth inside of some kind of company out there, it's so diminished compared to 20, 30 years ago, where company men, their career and identity were based on their job. But now I think we've come to this compromise between uh, companies that are happy to lay off people and people that uh, don't want their entire identity tied into with their company. I think the compromise has been that we do our job just fine. We get them to their end goal, and then they pay us, and that's it. So right when, if you're doing 9 to 5, right when it's 5 p.m., you're done, and you just get out of there. There's not this thing. There's not this underlying expectation from the job anymore that, hey, this is your life, so why don't you give us a little more extra? And I think during the interview process, when people were during the in the past, when you interviewed for something and you thought that this was your identity, that you were interviewing for your identity, uh, and no wonder why there are so many expectations for yourself, that you have to get this job because this is what you have been studying for, and this is what you've been preparing for all your life. And then you don't get that job and you wonder, is there something wrong with me? And what am I doing wrong? Am I not socially capable enough for this? And in reality, is that they have 1,000 different applicants. They need to go through this really quick, and you should be applying to 1,000 different jobs. So this one particular interview, you don't put so many eggs in the basket of this interview or this job. Next is about expectations about how I should live and enjoy my life. There were times where I had a very strong idea about how I should be living my life, and if someone was getting in the way of that, I would be hugely negative to them. Um, Especially, I think on this topic, that when you have an expectation about how life should be lived without any real values behind it, to me, it was that I want to have fun and positivity, and someone bringing me down was getting in the way of that fun and positivity. But the thing is that you might have this value of authenticity, and with authenticity, you might actually realize that going for fun and positivity can sometimes take second place when you're trying to help with someone that has their own issues. When you're just trying to seek fun and positivity all the time without any values, you might just drop the opportunities where you can actually have more fun in your life by being authentic and letting other people be authentic, even if they're sharing issues about themselves. And that was always an issue for me. Is like I think that I grew up repressing my feelings, and then I expected that others would suppress them as well. So my expectation about having fun was that people might have issues in their life, but they hide it and they try to not trample on other people with their baggage. And I'm not happy about how I rejected other people if they shared their baggage with me. So I told this person, I just want to have fun when they were trying to share with me very dark things about themselves. In my head at that time is like, why are they impeding on my life with this? But I realize is that someone might come up to me and realize that they want to share things with me. They want to share that part of their lives with me. Maybe you want timing on when to do it, but maybe the timing was right. But in my head, the timing was all wrong. And then when you have expectations about something, you have this very narrow vision about how something should play out. And when things don't go that way, you either try to block it out, you suppress it, or you ignore it. And so I was actively suppressing other people when they wanted to open up to me because I did not want to be open and I wanted to have fun. This bleeds into the expectations of others, but let's go into like parents' expectations of you or your expectations of how your parents should talk to you, your friends should talk to you, how your interactions should be with everyone. You set up these expectations, which a lot of people nowadays like they're setting up principles for themselves. The thing is that if you have these hard line principles about how to interact with people and how people should be talking with you, you're going to cut out those times where it doesn't feel perfect at that moment, but then it becomes perfect afterwards. When you set up these walls that right, but beyond that wall is a beautiful relationship or a beautiful exchange of words between with strangers or other people. Again, I think this is what I talked about last week is that expectations are those low or high walls. Sometimes you can have those low walls and you can see that, okay, I realize that there's something way better if I just drop my expectations about how this should go. Sometimes with like a music festival or something where you just see that, oh, there's a fun thing that I wasn't planning, but let's just go for it. But then there's those high walls. You don't know what's going to happen on the other side. If you spend the time to scale the wall, and even though it takes a lot of work and effort and it might be uncomfortable, you scale that wall, you find that there's something awesome on that side. You just ran into opportunities you would never have expected. And there are some times where you scale the wall and it's like, oh, that wasn't great. Now you just got a little more skill and strength on scaling that wall to break your expectations because there are those times where you're going to find the diamond in the rough. So when you make expectations of others, you are limiting yourself from finding those diamonds in the rough because not every way you're not going to the way you picture making friends in your mind or how your parents talk to you is likely not how it's going to actually go. And you should hear about all those stories about how someone became friends with someone else and they didn't even like each other at first. But it's that close proximity that you might drop. The problem is that in high school and in college, we get in close proximity on the daily level with other people. So even if we didn't like them, we're still in close proximity to them. So we understand them a little more, or we hate them a little more for being stuck with them. But there are those times where I when I was a kid, I was an enemy with this one other kid, and but then we actually had a fight, and after that we became best friends until I moved away. Life is really weird. The way that you think that, oh, a fight causes separation between two people, but then you find out that some people got into fights and then became best friends with those people. You set up an expectation that conflict equals separation, but then you might find out that conflict equals social connection sometimes. Sometimes, you don't like that's the thing about real life is that there's an exception to every rule. There's no shoulds in real life. There's only is and is not at that moment. And then those is nots sometimes become is. Those things that you didn't think would ever exist suddenly exist because life seems to find a way to do that. So when we set up expectations of others and ourselves and external circumstances like a job we apply to, we're setting up these walls and very narrow modes of experience that when they don't follow through, and a lot of times they won't, you're going to cause ripples in your conscious and your subconscious about your self-worth and other people's worth. You're going to make conclusions on things that didn't have actual value judgments to them because no event actually has a real value judgment. It's all in your head. So these behaviors derived from expectation can typically lead to disappointment and estrangement. When you don't get your way, you might just conclude, oh, I'm not meant for this experience. There are so many things that we'll plan and that won't go through, but if we take it personally or take it as a rule of life, then we're creating these rule sets in our head that aren't attached to reality. And so that estrangement is not just your estrangement from other people, it's your estrangement from how reality works. Reality doesn't care about your actions. It doesn't care about the consequences of an event. You take those consequences and you try to learn from them. But if you try to learn from them by closing your world just a little bit more, then reality is going to be as closed as the little cage you made for yourself. When I started cutting myself out of different activities and experiences because I thought this was not meant for me, it's kind of like I felt like a mouse that almost got stepped on, and now I come out of the hole and I'm always expecting to be stepped on. So I'm always looking around, worried that I'm going to get stepped on over and over again. You still sometimes want to come out for either like personal survival, you need to get food, or social survival, that you want to interact with people. And sometimes you come out there, but then you come out there with a terrible perspective of yourself and others. So you're always worried about being stepped on. And then everyone looks like a huge shoe to you that's about to step on you, and it makes those social experiences harder even when you want it so much. You're so attracted to trying to find friends and trying to find great social experiences, but yet you have this expectation that something wrong is going to happen. And I've lost lots of friendships because I set up unreal expectations about my about others and about myself. I think the most I would say that not even those usual expectations that, oh, my friends do this and that. I don't the expectation I had of my friends that probably caused most issues for myself is that I am so uncomfortable with inviting other people to do things with me that I just hope and I just kind of expect that they invite me to do things. And when you have a budding friendship and one person has to invite the other person the whole time, then it feels like there is a power imbalance that the other person is not giving enough effort. In my head, I took up almost every invitation I could to do things. And to me, I felt as if I was putting in a lot of effort to go to anything that people invited me to. But in their head, that's not what's going through their head. They're just saying, hey, I have to keep on inviting this guy. He might not be even that interested in the relationship. I'm reaching out to him the most. But those are the things that go through your head that you think that you're in the right here. And it's like, oh, I put so much effort into my friendships, and yet they always fall apart for some reason. And it's because you had this expectation that others do something for you, and you had these other expectations that you're worried that you're going to get rejected for the things that you do for others. And that's what I was always afraid of. Is like I had with my best friends, I was always afraid that, oh, if I send out the invite, they don't want to come. I had such a low self-confidence that I just thought anytime I invite someone to do something, it'll just be rejected. So I never tried. And then I didn't try enough for the friendships I did have. And then as I moved around different places, I didn't catch up with them enough, and it just fades away. I set up expectations that were unsustainable for myself. When I didn't feel very worthy of other people's attention, I set up expectations that, hey, when they are going to give me their attention, they'll do it. except it's just not how it works for a friendship. You have to, it's a 50-50 effort. And I never put in enough effort. Now that I realize I don't put in enough effort. It never made me entitled. It made me too sheepish to make a strong friendship. Like a strong friendship is two people wanting to engage with each other um, on a regular level. If only one person's regularly reaching out, then what are we doing? One of the best ways to defuse a bomb is to understand how it is made in the first place. So, what is expectation? I think it's being trapped in the neurosis of intellect. Let me just differentiate what intellect is versus maybe the subconscious and what is reality. Reality, a tree falls in the woods. There's nothing much to be said. A tree fell in the woods. What we do with our intellect is that we place value on the tree. Then we start adding a whole bunch of different adornments to that tree that the tree never thought about and reality doesn't think about. But we thought, is this an endangered tree? Is this tree dying from a certain disease? Was this tree protected by government regulations? And then that tree falls over, and now we're worried. So who cut it? Or did someone knock this tree down? Is it dying from a disease? Is it going to affect the rest of the forest? There's so many other things to this one event that's important to a human being because their intellect allows them to put layers on top of reality. That's the basis of miscommunication and expectations that we're an imaginative species, so we can um but imagination is not just about unicorns. It's about what we can think about an event that means nothing in all practicality. It means everything to us. So expectations generally aren't based on the actual motions of reality, the machinations. The tree falls, it just falls. It's just a verb and a noun. Our expectations is that with that idea of the tree, I really hope that tree doesn't fall. I think that it won't fall for another 70 years because the health of this forest is really good. There's so many ways you can think about this tree and expect different things from this tree because of your background knowledge. So then we go into, so in the playground of intellect, we don't know what is going to happen in the future. We just are smart enough to use our senses and our knowledge of the past to figure out what is likely to happen. The problem, though, is that our imagination is hugely tied to our emotions. An example would be that I I have to go to a party on Friday, and I'm stressed out about it because it's going to be a whole bunch of strangers I don't know. And when I think about this party, I can imagine myself meeting the people, and it makes me think of all the previous times I've gone to a party and it's been super awkward. I am thinking about this future event. I'm imagining it right now. I start getting emotions that I felt, the emotions and kinesthetic feelings that I got from the last times I went to a party, where it's a similar situation. So now my emotions are feeding into this imagination of the future, where I didn't feel that great last time. Now I'm making this imagined potential future situation feel not great. It's a snowball effect where we are fully manipulated by our emotions. That's why some of the best exercises, the what have you got to lose exercise is so useful because you imagine this event and you try to imagine the worst way that this event can go. And then you think to yourself, well, did that end my life? Am I still living? Is that okay? Can I live through this worst case scenario? And if you can, then you might as well engage with it because it could go way better than what you think is the worst. That is a good intellectual way to approaching a very emotional intellect that we have. But we don't seem to realize on how much our emotions affect our imagination and how we imagine future events. So we don't understand how much our emotions create expectation. We always realize in retrospect, but we never internalize it. And that's why it's so important for me to talk about this and talk with myself about this, because we always think in retrospect, like someone spins it up in their head that this is going to be the worst thing ever. This is going to be the worst thing ever. And they keep on thinking of different situations and how it's going to be horrible. Then they finally do it, and it's not even that bad. But they never internalize the idea that they were so wrong for so long, that they use so many of their mental processes to think about how bad this is going to be. And then it doesn't turn out bad, and then they just drop it. They say, "Oh, okay, it wasn't that bad." I'll mention this later on in the presentation, but that's what drives me nuts. We don't learn from our unfulfilled expectations, or we don't actively try to learn, and that's what we need to do more. Is that when something doesn't fulfill our expectations, we need to figure out what does that reflect on me for having set up this expectation in the first place. The sources of many fearful expectations are the fear of judgment and a fear of being unworthy to others. When you think about that awkward party, you're not coming in from a place of strength because you think that there's something wrong with you, that you're not going to be able to salvage a perfectly innocent meetup of people, that you're going to think that some awkward thing is going to happen. You could think that someone's going to do something awkward to you, but usually it's your internal self. It's like, hey, what if I'm not enough and I'm just going to bore people and I'm not going to be fun at this party. That is a mix of you thinking you're unworthy of people's attention, and then you're worried about their judgment of you. One is an external fear and the other one is an internal fear. The thing is that the internal fears can be worked on through practice. So you need to actually go to those parties. If you are only worried about unworthiness, the thing is that they're both tied together. This external because how could you be unworthy if you were alone on this earth? How could you be unworthy of, like, you're in a white box right now, alone on the earth? What are you unworthy of? There's no one to be unworthy of. There's no external judgment of worthiness on you. You would not be worried about worthiness if other people didn't exist. So, but it's still internal because it's something that you have to build up in your head, that you are worthy of yourself. That's the thing, is that if you can finally derive your worthiness from yourself, then you're not going to need other people. You're not going to have to worry about other people's judgment. But that's where it needs practice, because you need to be able to help supply yourself with resources to get over this worry of judgment from others and not thinking that you're enough for others. And that if you do bore someone at a party, it wasn't a great match for talking. They have different interests, you have different interests, and when you meet those people that have the same interests with you, you're going to be hanging out with them for hours because you love talking about those things. They love talking about those things, and you both have a pretty agreeable personality. You have to realize that in the innocence of a gathering of people, people are not looking to judge other people unless they have some issues for themselves about needing to do it to feel better. When everything aligns with each other perfectly, that personalities and interests align, unworthiness and judgment are not even relevant. It's only relevant in these expectations of the party. In reality, people don't want to judge other people. People just want to have fun and get along. And if you're going to parties where people don't want to get along and have fun, then that's another issue. There are a lot of other sources for fearful expectations besides judgment and worthiness, but I think that those for myself are the most relevant. I've always been scared of the disappointment of others, and every once in a while I'll experience it, and it doesn't feel good, like, and it's changed my whole life, and I'd say for the better. The one that mostly affected my life was working in Washington D.C. at the US Agency for International Development. When I was trying to start my career in international development, and I met these different office workers that work in this very white collar field in DC, I felt these mini disappointments inside these people's brains. This person, myself, is not the right fit to be part of our little class of white collar folks. I wasn't going to be useful to them on any kind of social or professional level to go up the career ladder. You could feel the careerism in bureaucracy in DC. And that's just fine for those people who like it, who have the ambition to be a great bureaucrat. But I didn't have that ambition, and I didn't like feeling that from other people. If I was slightly more confident in myself like I am today, I wouldn't have had as many issues for these conversations not work out with people, because like, yeah, we don't have a culture fit between each person. It's fine for us not get along in a way of not just be best friends and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, it made me feel as if I was just not right for anything that had to do with the office or social situations. It made me blow it out of proportion and create an expectation. I am not made for office work or having to interact with other people. So I wanted to work outside, do emergency service work, because like you kind of had to talk with people, and rather than those optional talking lunchtime things. That changed my life. Now I work in Wild and Fire. I cannot be more thankful for the choices I made, but it shouldn't have been in reaction to things I didn't feel good about. It should have been toward something, and I had nothing to go toward for so long. I didn't really have anything to go toward until like 2018, 2019, when I joined the Texas Conservation Corps. There's something so beautiful about the idea of conservation corps work, outside work, that I was moving toward that. But before then, it was just like, I don't like the office. I don't like this social setting. So I kept on doing different jobs to get away from things I didn't like. And that's not going to take you to the things that you love. Too many places where you can waste your time with things you don't love because you couldn't more easily find those things you loved. Some expectations are like riding a bike and just waiting for it to fall. You're learning to ride a bike, or you just, even worse is you've been riding a bike for 10 years, but all you're doing is riding this bike thinking, oh man, is this when it's going to fall? It's just like the mouse. Okay, this is going to be when it falls. I'm going to go over this curve. Oh, is it going to fall? Because you're going to be guiding your bike in certain ways where it minimizes your discomfort at times, where it's just like, oh, well, I know that like if I'm about to fall, then I'm just not going to take this part. You're going to take very few risks in life if you're constantly worried and expecting failure is going to happen around the corner. So the question is, why do we see this life direction and this bodily control to our intellect? Let's say we have intuition and intellect. And usually there's a good balance between the two, where you feel what you want and then you use your intellect to figure out precisely how to navigate your way to it. Whereas if you went full intellect, is like you're feeling things you want, but your intellect is saying, "Oh well, my parents said I need to do this career, so we just got to go this way." So that's when you're intellect driven, or you're fully intuition driven. Is like, yeah, you do these things and you completely alienate yourself from other people, because like you're probably pretty happy, but you could you could easily fall into a full-on narcissism. You don't have self-awareness if you're fully intuitive. You'll feel other people's rejection of you, but you keep on justifying, or it keeps on feeling good that you're following your intuition in certain ways. Like emotional intelligence is a mix of intellect and intuition. So you just can't go full on heart mode. It's gonna feel really nice though. It's gonna feel more aligned, but you use your intellect to figure out like, my heart wants to go this way. How do I do this that best develops myself as a person and other people around me, rather than just like I want to do what my heart says, and it's just gonna, I don't care about time anymore, and uh, accountability to other people, because the heart doesn't care about accountability to, unless they care about that person so much. It's a mix. So two things I thought about on why we see this direction of control to the intellect. We were burned by our emotions and organic experiences. Those raw, direct experiences that we tried to live turned out not very good for us. And then we imagined that maybe if I just work in objective thought, if I just considered things intellectually, then I would find the best way to experience something. So full on control of raw experience by intellectualizing about it. It's like a person who, instead of bungee jumping, was going to say like okay, I'm gonna watch you and I'm gonna write about it, and it's gonna be super cool. Or it could be a person who does the bungee jumping, but all they can think about is how they're going to write about this experience on their blog. Like you go through a filter in your head about how an experience works for you. So why did this happen? We probably ran into a lot of resistance when we were more intuitive with our environment as kids. They didn't, parents and authority figures didn't like the behavior of a fully intuitive kid just doing their thing. And I'm not, and as I said, it's like you need a balance. But the thing is that you can't whack a kid on the head for being fully intuitive and saying things that they shouldn't have and feeling things that you think are not appropriate at that moment because they are full without the conditioning that we have as adults and as we do get as teens interacting with other people. Kids are more in touch with themselves, and in our head it makes it more annoying because being fully in touch means being kind of like a lot more emotional feeling. If we think about expectations as the intellect affected by emotions, it's because we suppress, repress, internalize emotions and don't realize where we are on our emotional scale while making decisions and while thinking about the future. Whereas a kid puts their emotions right out there. It's like, I'm crying right now. I'm going to make decisions based on my crying or my anger. Whereas I'm thinking like I'm secretly angry and I'm thinking about the future and but I'm not accepting that I'm angry. Someone asks, "Are you angry?" I was like, "No, I'm not angry." And I'm just thinking about the future and how angry I am at stuff. And I think that like then my future feels very limited because my anger took out so many resources from myself. Curiosity, questioning, playfulness, nonlinear behaviors um, can make other people uncomfortable, especially very conditioned people. So we whack it out of them because then they look like more like an adult, a conditioned adult, and it makes it looks they look mature when they look repressed in their emotions and their intuition. When they just start intellectualizing about how they interact with other people, looks great to other people, looks fairly smart instead of someone that just does things. As kids, we were getting burned and we were getting deconditioned. Sorry, we were getting conditioned to ignore intuitive behavior and thought. And then we were not raised to flex the muscle of intuition and response. It is like a mental muscle to work with intuition, to feel something that's wrong or that's right, and then follow through with productive actions with those, with what feels right and wrong to you. We flex the muscle of intellect, so we try to rationalize our decisions based on like reasoning. So it's like I'm doing this thing because it's going to make me a lot of money, and I'm going to have a comfortable life with a lot of money, and I'll retire at 70. It's all going to be good because everyone's going to be comfortable, even if I don't really like that job. And so it's like these are the sacrifices we can make for the intellect because the intellect sees that there seems to be objectively more benefits to this one decision about their career or something. Whereas the intuition says, I don't like this. I might just give up a bunch of money because I don't like what's going on here. Our expectations are fueled by our perceptions of reality, which are then built on our perceptions of ourselves. This is the kind of thinking that life is what you make of it. You decide on whether life is this social, open, embracing thing or it's closed and effortful to get into, and it depends on how you think of yourself. If you think that, oh, it takes me a lot of effort for me to be social with other people, it takes a lot of effort for me to be open with other people, then you're going to make expectations in of reality that feels closed and hard. When someone makes fun of us for our ambitions to do something, what do you think that person thinks about for themselves? They think that it's kind of bullshit to do things for yourself and to try to do something beyond the norm. So they feel more comfortable that, hey, if I just act normally, I don't do anything that drives attention to myself, then I'm going to live a comfortable life. And then they make fun of other people that do it. So we think that a party will be awkward because we're focused on our own awkwardness. Why would a person confident about themselves expect awkwardness in a party? If they just think, "Wow, like I'm gonna be great at this party. Everyone else is gonna be great." You don't start getting these questions about how the future will be unless you have questions about yourself. And that's the issue I have, is that I have a lot of questions about myself when I'm put in front of other people. It's so hard. It's hard to untangle what my perceptions of reality are and what reality really is. I've cut myself out of a lot of good experiences because I just think that it wasn't for me. It doesn't mean that you need to experience everything because you have your values and your wants and desires. But sometimes you desire something and you don't get it. You don't do it because you expect that there's going to be failure or judgment at the other end of the rope. But it's like those likely won't actually happen. And if they do, they're not as bad as you think they are. That's what I have to repeat to myself. There's this paradox to living in expectation rather than living in reality. You feel validated by your anticipated disappointment, and especially if you subject yourself to that event that might cause it. So I'm saying, like, you go to a party and it actually is awkward, you feel validated as like, oh, I feel I must be predicting the future quite well. I must know reality quite well because the disappointment was there and I expected it. It happened. It makes you think that you know how reality works. And you think that reality has an order to it and it's especially ordered against you, that whenever you engage with it, something wrong is going to happen. Like my friend says that technology hates them. So, but when I look at how they interact with technology, they have no patience for it. And how are you going to have something work with you if you have no patience to try to understand it yourself? So you create a reality for yourself that technology doesn't like you, and you interact with it as if it doesn't like you, and then it doesn't like you. And there are times where you avoid a whole situation in anticipation of that negative event, and then you'll feel like you did yourself a favor. So you don't go to that party. It's like, man, I'm glad I didn't go to that party. Like, it would have been so awkward and just not fun at all. And then everyone had fun at that party without you. You cut yourself out of an experience because you had the arrogance to think that you knew how the future worked and how reality works. So I want you to consider this letter Ayn Rand sent to Boris Spassky in anticipation for a chess game between he and Bobby Fischer. You, the chess professionals, live in a special world, a safe, protected, orderly world, in which all of the great fundamental principles of existence are so firmly established and obeyed that you do not even have to be aware of them. You do not know that these principles are the preconditions of your game, and you do not have to recognize them when you encounter them or their breach in reality. In your world, you do not have to be concerned with them. All you have to do is think. If all we do is think without real action, we give power to rule sets that only exist in our subconscious and conscious mind. We don't what she what she's going after a different thing, is that chess is an imaginary land where there are concrete rules to the game, and they're so concrete that you just take it for granted. It's like knight does that whole thing where it jumps over and to the right or left, but we do that ourselves in our head. It's like, oh yeah, a party gonna be awkward, gonna be sucky, I'll avoid it. You are creating preconditions in how the world works without the world actually working that way. You're creating rules for the world. For the more forceful people out there, you're going to try to externalize those rules and push on others. Whereas a party what didn't have to be awkward, you might start making awkward because that was your expectation. So you start making actions that help promote that expectation. We give in to our emotional state at that time when we make an expectation about how something will be. Our imaginary world is as real as our strongest feelings in that moment. It just means that if you're super angry, our imaginary world is going to reflect our anger. If we're sad, our imaginary world is going to be affected by that sadness. And so our perception of the future is going to be affected by the rules, the changing rules that we have in this imaginary world. The only advantage that chess players have is that all the rules are clearly written for all the players of the game. The rules in our mind are a labyrinth. They contradict each other and they change each moment with different emotions and knowledge. And the worst thing is that when things don't go our expectations and things go better than our expectations, a lot of times we won't change the rules because we are so stuck on a perception of reality that we want it to be worse for ourselves because it gives us comfort that the world is fixed and orderly. So for waiting at the expectation station, we get ourselves trapped in these consequences. We're trapped in an intellectual we're trapped in an intellectualized prediction of the future, one that we think is objective and one that we think is going to be accurate, but it's still prediction based on your own emotions. We set ourselves up for disappointment as reality will never meet the level of conscious imagination. So when we create those high expectations about what's going to happen in life, we are going to get disappointment. But our problem is that maybe we want that disappointment because it keeps our world orderly. It keeps our world as if we imagined it. And then we take positive experiences as a fluke or we take it for granted. So we completely ignore. It's like, oh yeah, oh that went better. Well, like that was an exception. It could get worse next time. Or take it for granted is like, hey, this is great, and no reflection made at all. You need to reflect on when things are good and when they're bad, because if you reflect on the good when you don't need resilience, then you're going to be able to better reflect on yourself. Things are not going as you want when you don't have as much of that resilience. It's like blue sky planning. In Wild and Fire, you do blue sky planning when there are no fires. During the wintertime or when you're having a slow season, you do a bunch of planning on what you need to do when bad things happen. So then when something bad actually happens, you're fully planned for it. Rather than being reactive to bad things that happen in your life, you are already pre-planning, what am I going to do if that bad thing happens? So you're going to respond to a negative event or outcome rather than react to it with your head cut off. When our when we said, wow, this went really well for me compared to my expectations, you have to ask yourself, why did I set up the expectations in the first place to think of it so negatively? Why did I spend so much time thinking this is going to be so bad? What does this reflect on myself to be thinking so negatively on this thing? So then we can learn about ourselves. And then for the future, we can slightly modify what we expect. That party actually went pretty well last time, and I kept on working myself up thinking it was going to be bad. So if I work myself up again, I'm probably going to be wasting my time. I don't know if it's going to be the best party ever, but I'm going to come in with an open mind. And with that open mind, you're going to be opening up your interactions with other people. And that last consequence that we exempt ourselves out of from an experience because we already predicted it. It's almost like you already lived the experience by imagining it in your head and already thinking how bad it's going to be. So then you already got the satisfaction of doing the event. You cut yourself out of the experience and then you cut yourself out of the opportunity to have grown from both a bad or a good event. How do we get away from our expectations and perceive our present and future more openly? My thought is through the process of detachment. We let go of our experiences and accept them as past events. We can reflect on them as lessons and not evidence for self judgment. We let go of the past event by saying to ourselves, this negative experience that I had is in the past. It is not happening right now, and there's something to learn from it. I was just talking with my girlfriend about pictures of looking fat. You're 15 years old, you're super fat, you're not happy with it, and now you're fit, you're looking good, you're 30 years old. Someone shows you a picture of you being 15, and you say, "Oh, I can't look at that." What is the implication here? The implication is that this wasn't, it's still not a past event. It's somehow you looking at that picture of your 15-year-old self that looks in a way that you're not proud of, still affects you to this day So you have compressed your self concept from 15 years old to 30 all in one. That there's no difference between your 15-year-old self and your 30-year-old self. It's as your self worth and your image of yourself is only as strong as what's presented to you in that moment. Anytime you think about that 15-year-old self, you're just as fat as you were then. You're not detached. You're fully associated with past events as if they're still present events. You can't reflect on them. Obviously, this person didn't want to reflect on them. They didn't want to look at it at all. They wanted to forget as if it never happened because they couldn't accept it. They couldn't allow that to exist in their lives, and they couldn't accept that it exists. So when we detach from our experiences, we're allowing it into our life as a lesson. When we are fully associated with the event that's still happening, there's nothing to allow. It's still happening. You can't allow the constant, or you can, but we need to think of this as I'm looking back in my timeline as at this thing. So when we detach from our experience, we're going to be able to see our emotions that we experienced that day as just a response to the stimulus of experience. I was uncomfortable then. Yeah, that was uncomfortable for me because of you can contextualize it. I felt like I was a boring person. I didn't have very strong confidence at that time. But now I've grown as a person, and then is then and now is now. And now I can do these things. And even if I don't think I can, I need the practice. I need more lessons in my life. When we let go of our experiences and turn them into past events, we're leaving a door open to opportunity when imagining the future. Because when we're not associated with these negative beliefs that occurred in the last time you experienced this event, you get to imagine the future without those emotions affecting it. You keep on perceiving every experience in your life as a chance for learning and an opportunity to disprove what you've felt before. Why do we want to overcome our expectations? I think it's just because we're not meant to live in an imagined world. We're supposed to live in reality and we're supposed to live in the natural environment. The natural environment has no expectations of itself. It just does and is. Reality has no expectations. We set up the expectations because we're an intellectual species that wants to predict the future, and we want to use our imagination because it's it's very interesting. If you have it engages you when you have this positive or negative expectations of things, even if it's not doing good stuff for you. It engages you just like when we watch a movie of other people's imaginations. So if we overcame our expectations, we would enjoy life without the reservations. We would have these open senses, our touch, our smell. We would not have judgments over each of one of these senses and what's coming into them. And we just enjoy life in its raw form. So that's why some people want to overcome their expectations. And then there's the gamble that we can make with those small pieces of risk. When we realize it's not even risk, in our emotional head, we think that going to the party is a risk. We are going to unlock opportunities that we never expected. We're going to unlock the opportunity to disprove ourselves for the expectations we set up. We're also going to unlock opportunities where things go so well that it completely changes how you perceive life. Importantly for myself is that we would be able to create thoughtful responses to these events where we come in with no expectation. We just come in open mind, open hearted, and things just happen to us and we get to respond with our values rather than those automatic reactions we got by creating an expectation. When you come into an interview, just wanting to respond rather than react, where I would spend hours and hours and hours preparing for the interview, going through these scripts and stuff. So if they asked a question, I could react with this automatic response. And it just sounded like I memorized something to say to them. It doesn't sound very authentic. But if I could respond to them and just talk with them, you're going to change the dynamic of the conversation. Response versus reaction. Response is thoughtful or intuitive, and it comes from inside yourself rather than a reaction just is it's not yourself. It's kind of your reflexes. No one will get a better feeling of you if you're just being reactive because they're seeing the lizard brain of us when we see reaction. So, a question to you is, what do you want out of life? Do you want it filtered and rationalized and artificial? Do you want it like a chess game where there are rules in your head that you just work with, and that's how you can perceive life? It'll make it simple. Or do you want it direct, illogical, or organic? At least the illogicalness of life has a logic to it that you never know what to expect. If you don't know what to expect, then anything good or bad can happen to you. And most of the time, it's worth the risk. You get to practice your skills and just grow as a person when nothing is filtered, when it's raw. When we get it filtered, it's like processed sugar. Not much to get out of it. Easy though. But there are people out there that the only comfortable option that they have is the filtered life. And that's fine. Like, not everyone wants to get out of the filtered life. It's uncomfortable sometimes. And some people are just okay with keeping it all filtered. They get to decide when they're ready for real life. I bet if you're listening to this, you're looking for real life and you're looking for something more authentic and something that is more sensible too. We're in a crazy world where imagination seems to power 90% of our lives through entertainment and media. It's fully understandable that some people are going to, it's fully understandable that it's going to challenge a lot of people to try to get out of their comfort zone with this and get out of expectation and come into raw life. I think there's a growing number of people that are kind of waking up to what they want. They want something a little more real. And through detachment, we can find the real event and find the real lessons so we can develop ourselves more. Well, thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed some of this talk. I'll come in next week with maybe a different topic, or maybe even going further into this, because there's so much to talk about. You can talk about for hours the idea about expectations and detachment. Thank you for listening. This is the Bad Water. Have a good day.